Well, well, who's that striking gentleman? Laura's casual comment caught her husband Ethan and their friend Rebecca off guard, stopping them in their tracks before they even made it through the backyard gate. Rebecca followed Laura's gaze and noticed a man sitting with David, Laura's brother-in-law. Just a reminder, I'm standing right here, Ethan interjected with a forced smile, trying to keep things light. What? Am I not allowed to appreciate a good-looking guy when I see one? Laura shot back without missing a beat, her tone laced with defiance. Ethan sighed, irritation creeping into his voice. If you're going to check someone out, could you at least not make it so obvious? Before things could escalate, Ethan redirected his attention to Rebecca, offering a sheepish apology. Sorry about that, Rebecca, he muttered as they approached the gate. Rebecca, hosting the gathering with her husband Andrew, chose to ignore Laura's remark. No worries at all. Come on in, she replied warmly, holding the gate open. Ethan held up a case of beer. Where should I put these? Over by the tree, Rebecca directed. There are a few coolers filled with ice. Some are for the kids' drinks, but the rest are for the beer. Just find an empty spot. She then turned to Laura. You can put the gift on that table over there. As Ethan headed for the coolers, Andrew approached, greeting them with enthusiasm. Hey, welcome, you two. He gave Laura a friendly kiss on the cheek before grabbing the beer. Ethan, let me help you with that. But Laura wasn't done stirring the pot. She pointed across the yard. Hey, Andrew, who's that gorgeous guy sitting over there with your brother? Andrew, unaware of the earlier exchange, glanced in the direction Laura indicated. Oh, that's Alex. He works construction with David. Why, do you know him? Laura's smirk widened. Not yet, but I wouldn't mind. What a hunk. Andrew, taken aback, shot a surprised look at Ethan before chuckling nervously. Careful, Ethan. Sounds like she's on the hunt. Ethan forced a laugh, masking his growing frustration. Yeah, looks like I'm about to be traded in for a newer model. Rebecca, trying to lighten the mood, playfully slapped Ethan on the arm. That'll be the day, she quipped. Andrew, sensing the tension, tried to move things along. Come on in, you two. Rebecca, why don't you help Laura with the gifts? Rebecca caught the meaningful glance Andrew sent her way. It was clear he wanted her to get to the bottom of Laura's behavior. As they walked toward the gift table, Rebecca kept her voice low. All right, Laura, what's going on? Did you and Ethan have a fight? What are you talking about? Laura asked, feigning innocence. Don't give me that. We've been friends for years, and I've never seen you act like this in front of Ethan. Spill. Laura hesitated before responding. Fine. I'm just giving him a dose of his own medicine. He's out there every day, flirting with whoever catches his eye. You know Megan Thmopson? She told me she saw him at a restaurant with some waitress all over him. She kissed him, and they were laughing and flirting the whole time. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Laura, you know Ethan is friendly and outgoing. That's just who he is. A kiss is more than friendly, Rebecca. You know that, Laura snapped. Andrew kissed you a minute ago, but that's different. We've all been friends forever. This is some random waitress he sees when I'm not around. Rebecca sighed, trying to diffuse the situation. So, you decided to handle this at my daughter's birthday party? Not exactly the ideal time. Relax, Rebecca. I'm not going to do anything crazy, Laura reassured her. I just want to teach Ethan a little lesson. Rebecca gave her a look of warning. Just promise me you won't start any drama, okay? I won't, Laura replied with a mischievous grin. But let's be honest, look at that guy. He's built like a tank. Ethan would think twice before picking a fight with him. Rebecca glanced toward the driveway as more guests arrived. I've got to go play hostess, but remember, no fights. Got it? No fights. I promise, Laura said, her tone light but her expression defiant. Spotting the birthday girl, Jennifer, chatting with her friends, Laura made her way over. Ethan, having finished with the coolers, had the same idea. They arrived at the same time. Happy birthday, sweetheart, Laura said warmly. You're officially a teenager. Now you can really give your parents a run for their money. Ethan chimed in with a grin. Congrats, Jen. And don't listen to Laura about giving your folks trouble. Jennifer giggled, clearly flattered by their attention. Thanks, she said, giving Laura a hug and Ethan a quick kiss on the cheek. As they chatted briefly with Jennifer and her friends, Laura's focus drifted back to her plan. She leaned toward the birthday girl. "I'm going to say hi to your uncle. Catch you later." Ethan started to follow her, but paused when he noticed Andrew waving him over. As Laura sauntered away, Ethan called after her, "Behave yourself." Laura shot him a wicked glance over her shoulder before disappearing into the crowd. "What's up, Andrew?" Ethan asked as he reached the coolers. Andrew hesitated before lowering his voice. "Just a heads up, Rebecca had a chat with Laura. Sounds like she's mad about you flirting with some waitress." "Looks like Laura's picked up on the gossip," Andrew said, his voice low and measured. "I think she's trying to teach you a lesson, and all that hunk talk is just the beginning." Ethan furrowed his brow, genuinely confused. "I don't even know what she's accusing me of. Flirting with a waitress? That doesn't ring any bells. Did she mention where or who supposedly caught me?" Andrew shrugged. "She didn't give details, but it seems like her new strategy is to use Alex to get under your skin. Just try to keep your cool, all right?" While the two men spoke, Laura was already setting her plan into motion. She sauntered over to David and his friend with a calculated smile. "Hi, David," she greeted casually. "Hey, Laura. How's it going?" David responded, slightly surprised to see her. "Not bad," she replied, her eyes drifting toward Alex. "So, who's your charming friend here?" Before David could reply, Alex stood up and offered his hand with a confident grin. "Hi, I'm Alex. I assume you were referring to me? Who else?" Laura quipped, her tone playful but pointed. David, sensing where this was headed, decided to cut in. "Hey, Laura, where's Ethan?" She gestured vaguely toward the coolers. "Oh, he's chatting with your brother. I'd love one of those," she added, nodding toward the beer Alex was holding. Alex gave her an amused look, but before he could respond, Laura turned to David. "David, why don't you grab me a beer? You're the gentleman here, after all." Caught off guard but unwilling to be rude, David complied, heading toward the coolers. The moment he left, Alex gestured for Laura to take the now empty seat beside him. She obliged, settling in and stealing a glance across the yard, where she spotted Ethan. His eyes were fixed on her, and the frustration in his expression only emboldened her further. Back by the coolers, David approached Ethan and Andrew, shaking his head. "What's going on with Laura?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Ethan stiffened. "What do you mean?" "She's cozying up to Alex." "Who is this guy, anyway?" Andrew answered before Ethan could. "He's a construction worker. We're on the same crew building that high-rise downtown. I've known him for about 6 months. He's all right, but he's got a reputation. Definitely a ladies' man, and I wouldn't trust him around women." "Did he come alone?" Ethan asked, trying to piece together the situation. "Yeah, it was a last-minute invite. He was supposed to play golf today, but his plans fell through, so I told him to tag along," David explained, grabbing a beer for Laura. "Seems like Laura's plan is working, huh?" Ethan sighed heavily, his frustration mounting. He knew Laura well enough to recognize that once she latched onto an idea, she wouldn't let it go until she felt she'd made her point. Ignoring her might escalate things, but confronting her in front of Alex could create an even bigger mess. "David, do me a favor," Ethan said. "Just keep an eye on them. Let me know if this starts getting out of hand." David nodded, taking the beer and returning to Laura and Alex. As he handed her the drink and grabbed another chair, he decided to redirect the conversation. "Hey, Laura, did you tell Alex about Ethan's work? He's taken some incredible photos, like that lumberyard fire last year. Didn't he win a big award for that?" Laura's expression briefly flickered with irritation at the interruption, but she recovered quickly. "Oh yeah, Ethan works for the Tribute. He's won a few awards here and there," she said, her tone dismissive. Alex leaned back in his chair, glancing across the yard at Ethan. "That's your husband over there, right?" he asked, his voice carrying a faint edge. "That's him," Laura confirmed, her tone cool and detached. Sensing the tension, Alex shifted the focus back to himself. "I've always liked working with my hands, building something that lasts," he said, casting a knowing look at Laura. "There's a satisfaction in creating something tangible, you know?" "David," recognizing the line from countless bar conversations, felt like a third wheel. Deciding he wasn't helping the situation, he made his excuses and left, muttering about wishing his niece a happy birthday for the umpteenth time. Meanwhile, Ethan continued mingling with other guests, all the while keeping a close eye on Laura and Alex. The men at the party seemed to avoid commenting on the situation, but Ethan overheard snippets of gossip from the women. One particularly sharp remark caught his attention. Samantha, one of the wives, was chatting with her friends. "I can't believe her. She's over there acting like her husband doesn't exist," Samantha said, her voice dripping with judgment. "And that guy? What does he even do? Construction. She's probably trying to make Ethan jealous. My dad always says photographers find trouble wherever they go." Ethan smirked to himself. "Not Alex's fault," he muttered under his breath. "This mess is all Laura." As he glanced over at his wife, he noticed an empty beer bottle by her chair, with another already in her hand. Laura had a habit of drinking more when she was anxious, and today was no exception. Alex wasn't far behind. 3 empty bottles sat beside him. Just then, Andrew called out from the grill, announcing that the food was ready. Burgers, brats, chicken patties, and a variety of sides were laid out, and guests began lining up to fill their plates. Ethan saw this as an opportunity to break up Laura and Alex's cozy tete-a-tete. Maybe if he invited Alex to grab some food, it would give him a chance to learn more about the man and perhaps even de-escalate the situation. But before Ethan could act, he saw Laura and Alex setting their beers down and standing up together. Alex, emboldened by Laura's attention, gently took hold of her elbow as they stood together. His possessive gesture didn't sit well with Ethan. "Not happening," Ethan muttered under his breath as he made his way over to the pair. "Excuse me," Ethan said firmly, his voice edged with irritation. "Would you mind letting go of my wife?" Alex immediately released Laura's arm, raising his hands as if to diffuse the tension. "Hey, no problem," he said with a half-hearted chuckle. "We were just heading to grab some food." "Yeah, well, I'll take it from here," Ethan retorted, his tone clipped. Without giving Alex a chance to respond, he took Laura by her other elbow and steered her toward the food table. Laura's eyes narrowed. "What's gotten into you?" "That was completely uncalled for," she snapped. Ignoring her protest, Ethan guided her into the food line. "Grab a plate," he said flatly. "You and I are going to have a talk by the shed while we eat." Meanwhile, David, who had been watching the interaction from a distance, seized the opportunity to confront Alex, now standing alone. "What are you doing?" he demanded, irritation clear in his tone. "She's married to one of my brother's closest friends. Leave her alone." Alex shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Look, man, you should be talking to her, not me. She's the one coming on to me. I'm just being polite." "Polite? That's what you call this?" David shot back, his frustration mounting. "Seriously, Alex, knock it off. She's not interested. She's just trying to rile Ethan up over some nonsense about a waitress. Don't let yourself get dragged into it." Alex leaned casually against a nearby post, unbothered. "Hey, married or not, I've never turned down a woman like her. I know women, and trust me, this isn't some game. She's interested." David stepped closer, his voice firm. "Listen, this is my niece's birthday party, and I don't want any trouble. Back off, or you're out of here." Alex held up his hands in mock surrender, even giving a cheeky Boy Scout salute. "Fine, fine. Scout's honor. I'll back off, but if she comes to me again, I'll send her right back to her husband. Deal?" "Deal," David muttered, though he wasn't convinced. "Now, go grab something to eat and stay out of trouble." While all this unfolded, Laura wasn't particularly upset by Ethan's intervention. Alex's behavior had already started to feel overly familiar, and his suggestive remarks were growing tiresome. Still, she couldn't deny a flicker of amusement at how easily she could toy with men like him when she wanted to. But as Ethan gripped her arm with a firmness that left no room for argument, she realized she'd pushed him as far as she could without things spiraling further. She'd promised Rebecca there wouldn't be any drama, and Ethan had made it clear he wasn't intimidated by Alex's imposing physique. They each filled their plates with food, and Ethan gestured toward a quiet spot near the shed, away from the crowd. Once there, He handed his plate to Laura. "Hold this while I grab us a couple of chairs," he said, his tone neutral but tight. Despite his simmering anger, Ethan remained a gentleman, holding Laura's chair as she sat down before taking a seat beside her. They ate in silence for a few moments before Ethan finally broke it. "So," he began, his voice low but direct, "what's this talk about me flirting with a waitress? And what's with the games, Laura?" Laura hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know the exact details. Someone said they saw you last week. That's all I know." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Last week? That's pretty vague. Who supposedly saw me? Did they say where this even happened?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Maybe you should tell me. Do you flirt with every waitress you meet?" "Wait a second," Ethan interrupted, incredulous. "Are you saying they claim I kissed her too?" "That's what I heard," Laura confirmed, folding her arms defensively. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of disbelief and frustration. "Okay, there are only two possibilities here. Either someone made a mistake, or someone's outright lying to you. Because since we started dating, you're the only person I've kissed." Laura stared at him, searching his eyes. She'd always prided herself on her ability to read Ethan, and as far as she knew, he'd never lied to her. But doubt still lingered. "If it's not true, why would someone say they saw you?" she pressed. Ethan shrugged, taking a bite of his burger. "Beats me. You've got the source. Ask them. How do you know it's a woman?" Laura challenged. Ethan smirked. "It better be a woman. If a man told you he saw me kissing someone, I've already got my answer." Laura frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Simple," Ethan replied. "If it's a guy, he's trying to stir up trouble so he can swoop in and play the supportive friend, probably hoping to score points with you." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" he countered. "Think about it. Was it a man?" "No," Laura admitted reluctantly. "Then we're back to square one," Ethan said calmly. "You'll need to ask your friend why they're feeding you this garbage." A tense silence settled between them as they finished their meals. When they were done, Ethan leaned forward, his tone sharp but controlled. "This is Samantha's birthday party. I won't let it be ruined by you cozying up to some guy to make a point. If you keep at it, I'll leave you here, and you can figure out your own way home, or spend the night with Mr. Muscles. But don't expect to come back to my house. Got it?" Laura was taken aback by his intensity. "Ethan, calm down. I'm not going home with Alex, okay? I never even considered it. I was just trying to show you what it feels like when your spouse flirts with someone else." "Well, mission accomplished," Ethan replied flatly. "Now let's end it here." He stood, taking her paper plate and empty bottle. Without waiting for a response, he walked away to dispose of them, leaving Laura to sit and reflect on how the day had unfolded. As Ethan turned back from the trash bin, relief washed over him when he saw Laura by his side, her demeanor calmer than before. Across the yard, however, Alex sat alone, picking at his chicken patty, his frustration barely concealed. He had been sneaking glances at Laura and Ethan during their conversation, convinced that Laura's earlier flirtation wasn't just an act. He believed she was genuinely interested and eager for more, but knew better than to push his luck in such a public setting. Any plans he might have had to sneak away with her were now off the table. Too many eyes were watching. For her part, Laura made an effort to stick close to Ethan for the rest of the party. While she occasionally drifted off to chat with friends, she always returned to her husband's side, keeping things cordial. Her only other interaction with Alex came during the group rendition of Happy Birthday. As everyone gathered around Samantha's cake, Alex took advantage of the crowded moment to sidle up beside Laura. Under the guise of joining in the singing, he placed a hand on her lower back, letting it drift lower. At first, Laura assumed it was Ethan, but when she turned, she was met with Alex's smug grin. Her eyes widened in shock at his boldness. Glancing around quickly to ensure no one was watching, she found everyone focused on Samantha. Though her instinct was to slap him across the face, she hesitated. A scene would only create the drama she had promised Rebecca to avoid. Besides, she realized with some guilt that her earlier behavior had likely encouraged him. She resolved to set things straight with Alex later, making it clear there was no real interest on her end. As soon as the candles were blown out and applause erupted, Alex withdrew his hand as though nothing had happened. Ethan, catching the sound of Alex's voice nearby, glanced over briefly but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Laura, however, chose not to mention the incident. She figured her silence would prevent further complications, but Alex, ever opportunistic, took her lack of reaction as approval. Alex kept a careful watch on Laura as the party moved into its next phase. He knew she would eventually need to step away to use the restroom. If he could catch her alone, he could press his advantage. Meanwhile, the rest of the guests, unaware of the underlying tensions, began to relax. Even David, who had been wary of Alex's intentions, allowed himself to believe the situation had cooled. Only Ethan remained vigilant, instinctively distrustful of men like Alex, smooth talkers who believed they were irresistible. As the evening picked up, Andrew turned on the outdoor speakers, filling the yard with music. Guests gathered for games, including darts, a beanbag toss, and even a few rounds of bingo. Samantha and her friends challenged their parents to a beanbag game, which Laura and Ethan accepted with good humor. Despite an early win for the adults, the teens dominated the next 2 rounds, claiming victory. After the game, Laura gave Ethan a quick kiss on the cheek. "I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back," she said casually. "All right," Ethan replied. "I might challenge David to a game of darts while I wait." Laura chatted with a few friends on her way into the house and was relieved to find the downstairs restroom unoccupied. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her. As she touched up her makeup, David noticed Alex quietly slipping away from the festivities. "Where's he going?" David muttered, loud enough to catch Ethan's attention. Ethan paused mid-throw and turned to David. "What's up?" "Alex is leaving," David explained. "Didn't even say goodbye or thank Andrew for the invite." Ethan turned toward the gate and spotted Alex disappearing through it. "He's probably sulking because Laura isn't giving him the attention he wanted," Ethan remarked dryly. A sudden thought struck him. If someone wanted to re-enter the house without being seen, they'd leave through the gate, circle around to the front, and come in that way. Handing his darts to David, Ethan said, "I'll be right back." He made his way toward the house, a gnawing suspicion driving him. Inside, Laura had finished in the restroom and was about to leave when she opened the door to find Alex standing there, blocking her path. Before she could react, he grabbed her shoulders, pushing her back against the doorframe. His lips crashed onto hers in a forceful kiss. In her shock, Laura froze for a moment, struggling to process what was happening. Just as her instincts kicked in and she began to push him away, Ethan appeared at the doorway. In an instant, he seized Alex by the shoulder, yanking him away from Laura. Without hesitation, Ethan drove a fist into Alex's solar plexus, sending him stumbling backward into the bathroom. Alex collapsed to one knee, clutching his chest and gasping for air. Laura stood frozen, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of events. When she finally looked up, Ethan was gone. Panic set in as she scanned the house, calling his name. Her heart sank as she heard the sound of a car engine starting. Rushing to the front door, she arrived just in time to see Ethan backing their car out of the driveway and speeding off. Realizing how the situation must have looked to him, especially after her earlier interactions with Alex, Laura felt a wave of regret and fear. Ignoring Alex, who was still wheezing on the bathroom floor, she ran out the back door. The first person she encountered was David, standing by the dartboard, still holding Ethan's darts and clearly unaware of the chaos unfolding inside. "David, you have to drive me home. Now." Laura's voice trembled with panic as she grabbed his arm. David blinked, startled by her urgency. "Laura, what's going on? Where's Ethan?" "He left," she replied, her words tumbling out. "He caught Alex kissing me and—" "What? Is Alex hurt?" David cut in, his voice sharp with concern. "No, he's still in the house. I don't know how hurt he is, but Ethan punched him. Hard." David couldn't help but smirk at the thought. Ethan punched Alex? Well, that makes sense. "David, this isn't funny," Laura snapped. "I have to get home and explain what happened." Ethan was so furious. "I'm scared he's planning to leave me." David shook his head, trying to calm her down. "Laura, I doubt that. He's upset, sure, but I've known Ethan a long time. He wouldn't just walk out on you." You didn't see him just now, she insisted, her voice breaking. Please, David. I need to go. I'll help, but let me check with Andrew first, David said, gesturing for her to wait as he headed off to find his brother. A few minutes later, David returned with a grim expression. Looks like I'm blocked in. There's no way I can get my car out. What? Laura's eyes widened. What am I supposed to do? You can borrow my car, David offered, fishing his keys from his pocket. It's tight, but you should be able to maneuver it out. Are you serious? Thank you, Laura exclaimed, relief flooding her face. She hurried to the car and climbed in, her hands trembling as she started the engine. David gave her a quick overview of how to navigate the tight space. The driveway was packed, leaving barely a foot between his car and the garage door. Laura followed his instructions, carefully edging forward and backward, avoiding the other vehicles by inches. Finally, she managed to free the car and head toward home. The drive was tense and silent. Laura's mind raced, replaying Ethan's expression, the raw anger in his eyes. She had never seen him like that before, and the thought that this might be the breaking point in their marriage terrified her. When she pulled into their driveway, she saw Ethan's car parked neatly in its usual spot. Her heart pounded as she stepped out. David had offered to come inside with her, but she declined, insisting she needed to handle this on her own. She gave him a grateful nod before climbing the porch steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. "Ethan," she called out, her voice shaky. When there was no response, her stomach sank. Was he upstairs packing? Bracing herself, she started toward the stairs, but the faint hum of the coffee grinder stopped her. She turned toward the kitchen, a flicker of hope in her chest. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "Did your lover bring you home?" he asked coolly. Laura flinched at his words. "Ethan, he's not my lover," she said, her voice pleading. "The last time I saw Alex, he was still on the bathroom floor, gasping for air after you hit him." Ethan nodded but didn't reply, turning his attention back to the coffee maker. His silence was unnerving, and Laura felt the need to explain herself. "He caught me off guard, Ethan," she began hesitantly. "I didn't willingly kiss him. He ambushed me as soon as I opened the door. He pushed me against the frame and kissed me." Ethan's voice was flat as he replied, "I didn't see you resisting." "You intervened before I had the chance," Laura countered. "I was stunned, trying to process what was happening. Before I could push him away, you stepped in." Ethan remained quiet, methodically preparing his coffee. The lack of emotion in his movements unnerved her more than if he'd yelled. She almost wished he'd let his anger out. It would be easier to handle than this icy detachment. "Well?" she prompted, desperate for some kind of reaction. "Well, what?" he replied, hitting the start button on the coffee maker. "Ethan, I've never seen you so angry before. I thought for sure I'd come home to find you packing your bags." "Don't tempt me," he growled, his voice finally rising slightly. "You're damn right I'm angry. That little stunt you pulled today was childish and disrespectful." Laura flinched, but Ethan wasn't done. "What infuriates me the most," he continued, "isn't even the spectacle you made. It's the fact that you chose to believe one of your shallow friends over me. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me or be jealous?" "No," she admitted quietly. "Never." "And yet," he said, his voice tightening, "you decided to make me the villain. You trusted gossip instead of trusting me." Laura hesitated, biting back a response. She had never heard him refer to her friends as shallow before, but she knew now wasn't the time to argue about it. "Ethan, I know how outgoing you are. I've seen it. You're friendly with everyone, even women. But you don't realize how they look at you when you're not paying attention. I've seen it. They'd throw themselves at you in a heartbeat." Ethan raised an eyebrow, wry smile tugging at his lips. "You're making me sound like Brad Pitt." "It's not ridiculous," Laura shot back. "I've seen it." "Well, maybe you should trust me instead of focusing on what you think you've seen," Ethan replied firmly. "Because if we don't have trust, what do we have?" Laura lowered her gaze, realizing he was right. The weight of her actions and misplaced distrust settled heavily on her shoulders as Ethan sipped his coffee, his quiet anger still palpable. The tension in the room was palpable. Laura realized the situation was spiraling out of control, and she needed to calm things down before it got worse. "Ethan," she said carefully, softening her tone, "all I'm trying to say is that you're naturally charming. People are drawn to you. Some women might misinterpret that as flirting. They could think you're available, regardless of the fact that you're married." She hoped this would ease the tension, but Ethan wasn't ready to let it go. "So how does that justify you believing that I'm out here kissing waitresses and trusting your friend over me, your husband?" Damn, she thought. That was the question she'd been hoping to avoid. Their argument dragged on for another 20 minutes, with neither willing to budge on the fundamental issue of trust. Despite their heated exchange, neither suggested sleeping on the couch or in separate rooms that night. Still, Laura sensed any semblance of closeness was off the table. Ethan wasn't ready to forgive, and she wasn't about to grovel to change his mind. The following Tuesday, Ethan met Andrew for a drink after work. Ethan had already settled into his seat and taken a sip of his beer when Andrew arrived, grinning broadly. "Yo, Rocky, how's Adrian?" Andrew quipped, attempting his best Sylvester Stallone impression. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that?" "Yeah, but I can't pull off a Burgess Meredith impression, so you'll just have to deal with it," Andrew said, chuckling as he slid onto the bar stool beside Ethan and ordered a beer. "Seriously, though, how are things with you two?" Andrew asked, his tone shifting to one of genuine concern. Ethan sighed. "Barely speaking. I'm still mad, and she knows it, so she keeps her distance." "When are you going to cut her some slack?" Andrew asked. Most of the people at the party didn't even notice there was anything going on between you two. "After you left, some folks asked about you and Laura." "What did you tell them?" Ethan asked. "I said something came up and you had to head out," Andrew replied. "Nobody questioned it. They probably assumed you two were in a rush to get home and, you know." Ethan snorted. "Yeah, well, let's just say there hasn't been much eagerness in that department since the party." Andrew leaned in. "Speaking of which, what's the deal with Alex? Is he planning to stir up trouble?" "I doubt it," Ethan said. "David told me what happened before he drove Laura home. When I left, Alex was still in the bathroom, trying to recover. He called it a sucker punch." "It was a sucker punch, wasn't it?" Andrew teased. Ethan shrugged. "What else was I supposed to do?" Andrew smirked. "Well, Alex mentioned something about getting back at you, but I warned him off. Told him you're the toughest guy I know, the kind who's taken down men twice his size. I even quoted the Bible." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You quoted the Bible? Since when do you have a favorite Bible verse?" Andrew laughed. "It's my own version. Yeah, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of pass away, he fears no evil, for he's the toughest, meanest SOB in the valley." "That's you." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. "That's nonsense, and you know it." "Of course I know it," Andrew said, grinning. "But Alex doesn't. I think I scared him enough to keep his distance." "Thanks, buddy," Ethan said, lifting his beer in a small toast. "I appreciate it." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Ethan spoke again. "You know what really gets to me, though? That she doesn't believe me. She thinks I kissed some waitress." Andrew tilted his head. "Are you absolutely sure you didn't? Maybe just a peck on the cheek?" Ethan started to reply, "No, but trailed off as something dawned on him. His expression shifted, and Andrew noticed. "Aha," Andrew said, pointing at him. "You did kiss her, didn't you?" "No," Ethan replied firmly. "She kissed me. And now I know exactly what this is all about." The next day, Laura was surprised when Ethan walked into her office unannounced. Before she could speak, he cut her off. "Let's go to lunch," he said. "Now." Laura blinked in confusion. "Now? It's early. Can you wait 20 minutes? I've got things to finish." "No need," Ethan said calmly. "I already spoke to your boss. Told them it was a minor family emergency and arranged for an extended lunch break." Her confusion deepened. "A family emergency? What's going on?" "Come on," Ethan urged, holding the door open for her. "I'll explain on the way." Reluctantly, Laura followed him to the car, her unease growing. Once they were on the road, she asked, "Where are we going?" And what's this emergency? Call your friend, Ethan instructed, ignoring her question. Ask her for the name of the restaurant where she supposedly saw me. Laura hesitated, but did as he asked. She said it was Dumar's on Homan Avenue. Ethan smiled. Good. That's where we're headed. What? Laura stared at him, her anxiety mounting. Why would you want to go there? What are you planning? Ethan didn't answer, his expression calm but unreadable. Laura's mind raced as the car wove through traffic. Was he planning to confront her? Embarrass her? Or worse, would he flirt with the waitress in front of her to prove some kind of point? No, Ethan wouldn't do that. She decided to wait and see. By the time they pulled into the restaurant parking lot nearly half an hour later, Laura was on the verge of tears. Her stomach churned with dread as Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her back and guided her toward the entrance. Trust me, he said softly, opening the door for her. Laura felt a knot tighten in her stomach as soon as they stepped into the restaurant. Trouble was waiting. She was sure of it. Damn, she muttered under her breath. Ethan didn't seem fazed. He found a booth, gestured for her to sit first, and then slid in across from her. Well, looks like you brought your better half today, said a cheerful voice. Laura turned to see their waitress approaching, a warm smile on her face. Hi, Rachel, Laura greeted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Laura, how'd you manage to get my cousin here for a real lunch? And with his wife, no less. Usually, he's in such a rush he can barely stay long enough to eat, Rachel joked, placing menus on the table. Ethan wasn't about to let Laura off easily. Laura seems to think you and I are having a passionate affair, he said, deadpan. Laura froze, waiting for the punchline, but it didn't come. What? No, Rachel, that's not true, she blurted, turning to her husband. Ethan, come on. I made a mistake. I already apologize. Rachel looked between the two, confused. What's going on? Laura sighed, facing Rachel again. A friend told me last week that Ethan kissed a waitress here. I didn't even know you worked here until now. Oh gosh, Laura, that's all this is about? Rachel said, looking flustered. Last week, I gave him a peck on the cheek when he came in. It was just a friendly gesture. I hadn't seen him in a while, and well, he is family. Rachel, don't worry about it, Laura said, her voice calmer now. I understand. My friend completely misled me, and I'm going to have a word with her. I'd like to hear that conversation, Ethan said, his tone challenging. Laura met his gaze, her resolve firm. Fine, she said, retrieving her phone. Both Ethan and Rachel leaned closer as Laura dialed. Hi, Megan, Laura began, her voice tight. Not great, actually. You remember the waitress you said kissed Ethan? You know who that was? His cousin. Yeah, his cousin. She paused, letting the words sink in. No, I didn't appreciate you telling me. You made it sound like he was having an affair or something. I don't care what you think you saw. Keep your gossip to yourself from now on. Goodbye. She ended the call with a sharp press of her finger, her face flushed with anger. Ethan smirked knowingly. He'd suspected Megan was the source of the drama. She had a habit of stirring the pot and often made disparaging remarks about her own husband. I truly apologize, Laura said, her voice softening as she turned to Ethan and Rachel. To both of you. Ethan was right. I should have trusted him. You'll have a few more apologies to make when we get home, Ethan reminded her. You owe Andrew, Rebecca, and Samantha an explanation. What about Alex? Laura asked, raising an eyebrow. Alex can take a hike, Ethan said firmly. A married woman is off limits, no matter how much she flirts. Who's Alex? Rachel asked, looking intrigued. Her boyfriend, Ethan said with a straight face. Laura rolled her eyes. Don't listen to him, Rachel. I made a mistake, and he's not done rubbing my nose in it. Rachel chuckled, shaking her head. Sounds like you two had an interesting weekend. You could say that, Ethan replied. Let's just say Laura learned a valuable lesson about trust. Embarrassed, Laura quickly changed the subject, opening the menu. So, Rachel, what do you recommend? Later that evening, Laura spent nearly an hour on the phone, apologizing to Andrew, Rebecca, Samantha, and anyone else she'd wronged. Each call left her feeling lighter, though she knew the most important reconciliation had already happened at lunch. That night, as they lay undressed in bed, Laura turned to Ethan, her voice hesitant. "Are you still mad?" "It depends," Ethan replied. "On what?" "On whether or not you still think I'd cheat on you." Laura sighed. "I never really thought you'd cheat. I was just worried you might give someone the wrong idea. I didn't want you to lead anyone on." Ethan considered her words, remembering the anger and jealousy he'd felt watching her flirt with Alex. Though he'd never admit it, he understood her perspective a little better now. Just as he was about to tell her he forgave her, Laura's hand slid down his body, her fingers brushing lightly against him. "Come on, honey," she cooed. "You can't stay mad at me." Ethan's breath hitched as her hand gently wrapped around him, stroking slowly. He closed his eyes, letting out a soft sigh as her red hair brushed against his skin. The sensation of her lips' trailing kisses sent shivers through him. "Oh, God!" he groaned as her teasing touch worked its magic. Laura knew she was already forgiven, but she wanted to push the moment to its peak. Swinging a leg over him, she guided him inside her, moving rhythmically as she leaned forward, her hands pressing against his chest. "Babe, I'm not gonna last long," he groaned, his voice strained with pleasure. "Me either," she gasped, her movements quickening. Moments later, her body arched, her head thrown back in ecstasy. That was all Ethan needed to join her, surrendering to the overwhelming release. A month later, Laura and Rebecca were having lunch together. Rebecca couldn't resist bringing up the topic. "You and Ethan seem to be doing better. Does he still flirt with waitresses?" "Not as much," Laura admitted. "He's still friendly, and I wouldn't want him to change that. It's one of the things I love about him, but he's more mindful now. He pulls back when he needs to." Rebecca smiled knowingly. "That's all you wanted, isn't it?" "Exactly," Laura replied. Rebecca hesitated before asking her next question. "So, have you heard from Alex?" "No," Laura said with a smirk. "And honestly, I'm a little insulted. One punch, and he just disappears? What a wimp." The two women burst into laughter, the tension of the past month finally behind them.